Good morning. I'm Waddy Brooks Hall, class of 1975. It is my pleasure to introduce our chapel speaker today, my classmate, Penny Spieglman Register Shaw. Penny and I have been good friends since we were 10 years old, and for those of you trying to do the math, that's 51 years. Wow. We have always had close friendships in our class, and Penny says her best friends are still from the class of 75. Penny graduated from Rhodes College and Vanderbilt Law School. She received her MBA from Questrom School of Business in Boston. Penny served as Senior Vice President and General Counsel for a FedEx subsidiary here in Memphis for 17 years and has spent the last 2 years in Seattle working for Amazon, as well as doing consulting. I'm very happy to announce that Penny will return to Memphis next month, where she will be supporting the Global Pediatrics Unit at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. In her spare time, Penny is a marathoner, a traveler, an author. She is married to Adam Bennett Shaw, an accomplished artist, and mother to the beautiful Sophie Register, her greatest accomplishment, she claims, and who lives in Washington, D.C. Her dogs, Willow and Anya, complete her immediate family circle. I have already heard Penny's speech. Like any good St. Mary's girl, we had a trial run last night. It is so insightful and wonderful reflection on life and its lessons. I encourage you to pay close attention to what she has to say. Penny is spot on with her comments and advice. Let's give my dear friend Penny a big welcome.
Good morning. I am Penelope Warren Spieglman Register Shaw, the St. Mary's alumni with the longest name, but please, I invite you to call me Penny. I graduated with the amazing class of 1975 at St. Mary's. I'd like to thank Gigi Gould, Angie Gardner, the trustees, students, staff, teachers, and alumni of St. Mary's for having me here today. And I'd like to thank my friend Waddy Brooks, outstanding St. Mary's alumni of 2007, and as you heard, my friend for over 50 years, for introducing me this morning. This summer, when I found out that I would be speaking to you in October, I went to a set of experts for advice on what makes a great chapel talk. My niece, Sarah Ottinger, and her friends in the 8th grade were very clear. Make 3 to 5 main points, be concise, and get off the stage. Therefore, with their advice ringing in my ears, I'm going to make 3 to 5 main points about how to live a happier life from this moment forward. Before I begin, I want to be clear that I am not espousing a 100% Pollyanna approach to life. If you don't know, Pollyanna was a character in a series of books and movies the last century, which taught little girls everywhere to be glad about their situation, no matter how bleak. While I admire Pollyanna's, what they used to call pluck, I also temper this advice with the realization that there are situations in which it is completely appropriate to be deeply unhappy. This year alone, I have lost my father-in-law, a favorite aunt, an uncle, and left a job in Seattle. Ignoring those events and failing to honor them or examine them would not be helpful to me in the long run. When I say be happier, I'm really using that as shorthand for saying a whole host of other things. True happiness is not about good grades, getting into Yale, or weighing 115 pounds? What if, to paraphrase the Grinch, happiness doesn't come from a store? What if, perhaps, happiness means a little bit more? There was a time in my life when I knew instinctively how to be happy. If I was hungry, I ate a bell pepper. Yes, bell peppers were honestly my favorite food, and not the fancy red and yellow ones that we have today, but those yucky green ones. If I was filled with undirected energy, I went outside and ran around the block. If my homework wasn't done by 11 p.m., I went to bed. My life flowed in this long, contented river. Somewhere around my senior year in high school, things started to change. I became sad in that wear all black, sit in your room and listen to the same Barry Manilow song over and over again, write bad poetry, sad. I stopped hanging out with my friends and became a bit of a loner. I had study hall in the senior den with only one other person, Sissy Seitz. In it, we listened to the same sad Cat Stevens song over and over again. If you don't know who Barry Manilow or Cat Stevens are, my first advice is ignore Barry Manilow. Second, download Tea for the Tillerman immediately following chapel. And third, replace those references with Drake, and you'll get what I mean. When I look back, I try to identify reasons for that period of time being one in which I became truly melancholy. The easy answers are hormones, genetics, circumstances, and that I just read Macbeth. But the deeper one is I stopped doing what came naturally or instinctively to me and started to listen to other voices, trying to live up to someone else's ideals. I started making choices about my life based on what I thought would make my mother, stepfather, or father happy. A little later, it became about how to please my boyfriend and my first husband. And eventually, it became about how to live up to some imaginary images I was seeing on television or in magazines. Instead of having the courage to go with what I felt, what I knew in my heart was right for me, and what St. Mary's had taught me about having strength, I retreated farther and farther into myself and usually chose the path of least resistance. For the next 20-odd years of my life, during the best of times, I was mildly depressed. During the worst, I was in my brown study, a phrase that means so lost in solitary thought that I was unaware of my surroundings. What happened to change me from that moody person to an authentically happy one? How did I go from that state to one of the most optimistic people on the planet? Here are my 3 to 5 tips for achieving happiness. I have very purposefully chosen the word tips and not rules because these are what has worked for me. Tip 1, with pictures. There is no such thing as a typical St. Mary's girl, and extrapolating from that, there is no one-size-fits-all path to happiness in life. 1975 was the last class in which the St. Mary's teams were called the Bells of St. Mary's, a play on Southern belles, and a movie with Bing Crosby and the luminous Ingrid Bergman about nuns. We were sandwiched between 1974, which was a class of athletes and scholars, and 1976, which had the charisma and energy to get the mascot changed to the turkeys. We always believed that we were somehow an embarrassment to St. Mary's, as we had no one going to Princeton, no one modeling for 17 magazine, no one going to the Olympics. But somehow this little gang of misfits has managed to hang together for 43 years and produce a vice admiral in the U.S. Navy, the world's preeminent trademark attorney, start several businesses that are all successful from scratch, serve as hospice nurses who aid elderly and dying patients, take up belly dancing, run 32 marathons, and hold the record for 6 consecutive years of 100% donations to the annual fund. I'm going to make this a little more personal and not just talk about my class as a whole. I'm going to talk more about me. When I went to St. Mary's, the perfect girl, and I did have a picture of her, was the princess, the Queen of May, the president of the student council, the spirit of St. Mary's. That was all the same girl. Imagine, if you will, a combination of Taylor Swift and Princess Diana, and you'll have a pretty accurate picture of Margaret Flowers. For those of you who know Margaret, you know also that this is no illusion. She was amazingly kind and wise, even at 17. Here is a picture of me at the same age. Please note the bare feet. The scruffy boyfriend who looks 35, even though he's honestly 16 years old. These two hippies have got to be up to no good. The truth of the matter is, in this picture, we were crossing the street to go to church. Even though I was probably as wise and as full of good intentions and good acts as Margaret, although much less well-groomed, I envied her in high school and always felt somehow less than. Oh, good, I'm glad we caught the picture of this picture. My daughter actually keeps this in her bedroom because she says this was her potential father. Today you are faced with a barrage of carefully curated images on Facebook and Instagram. I just completed 2 years at Amazon, and I can tell you for a fact that an algorithm has projected what lovely photoshopped pictures you see on your newsfeed. And often those pictures are constructed purposefully to make you feel bad about the current state of your life, so that you have to buy something to gain popularity, comfort, or inner peace. If you happen to get a real person on the internet, in 2015, Forbes magazine estimated that of the 2.5 billion comments posted on Twitter during a month, up to 80% of them are negative. We use the perceived anonymity of the internet to bully schoolmates, be curt with family members, be aggressive with coworkers. It's super hard to be the target of such boorish behavior, but in many ways, it's worse to be the one dishing it out. There's a saying I like about arguing on the internet. It's like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. In case I've been too opaque here, my number one tip for immediate happiness in your life: take a break from social media. Or if you can't get off Snapchat, at least be kind. Tip 2, invest in experiences, not stuff. When I was at St. Mary's, we took the last class trip to New Orleans. I did not go because I was truly a homebody. I liked hanging out with my sister Sue Ellen and my brother Brett Spieglman. I really liked sleeping in my own bed. I probably would have gone on like this for the rest of my life had my mother not sprung a trap. She literally, and I think I'm using that word correctly here, came to my summer job, told me to buy a raincoat, gave me $1,000 worth of traveler's checks, and put me on a plane to England. After I stopped crying, I had the most magical time of my life attending a study program at Oxford University. I visited Stonehenge and the British Museum, lived in a dorm room that had once been occupied by a Romanov prince, and fell in love. Thanks to my St. Mary's education, I could imagine Beowulf, Chaucer, and Heathcliff on every corner. Since then, I've been lucky enough to travel all over the world. I've been to every state in the Union, and I've been to 27 countries and loved 26 of them. Sorry, Malaysia. 3 weeks ago, I was floating in the Dead Sea and praying at the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem. But travel isn't my only indulgence. Thanks again to my awesome mother. I saw the Beatles at the Mid-South Coliseum when I was 9 years old. My single mother, who had 3 children under the age of 10 and made $3,000 a year teaching at PDS, established in her children an appreciation for live music that has meant that my siblings and I have often picked seeing Prince, Bruno Mars, the Rolling Stones, the Avett Brothers, U2, Beyonce and Jay-Z over eating on many occasions. I'm still waiting for the chance to spend an entire paycheck to see Hamilton, but believe me, I'll do it. What I'm telling you is if it's ever a choice for you between a new purse, a fancy car, a pair of Jimmy Choos, pick going to the Great Wall of China, witnessing a solar eclipse, seeing the Northern Lights, attending the Super Bowl, riding around in Drake's limo, listening to stories about Rihanna's family. I did that. But don't stay home. Tip 3, practice self-compassion. We hear a lot about having compassion for others. In To Kill a Mockingbird, Atticus Finch tells Scout, "You never really understand a person until you consider things from his or her point of view, until you climb into his skin and walk around in it." This is beautiful advice about empathy and understanding why someone acts the way they do, even if you don't agree with it. I'm talking about extending that same kindness to yourself. Everyone makes mistakes, major and minor ones, intentionally or unintentionally. No one is holding on to your mistakes as much as you are. Figure out how easy or hard it will be to fix it, then fix it. Make a plan on how not to repeat the mistake and then let it go. Recently, I saw a card which said, "Embrace the detours." I bought it and sent it to myself. I do that all the time, by the way. You're great. Keep it up. Tip 4, exercise, sleep, and meditation. This is a 3-for-1. When I moved to Seattle, people often ask me what I miss most about Memphis. 9 times out of 10, my answer was my running group. You see, I had this great posse of 8 women, ages 26 to 53, who met at 6 a.m. 4 times a week to run. On Saturdays, our long run, we spent up to 5 hours on the road together. And then we had lunch. My husband often inquired, "What do you have to talk about for so long?" The answer, everything. In Washington, I replaced that time exercising with commuting in horrible traffic. It wasn't a fair trade. My advice, find yourself an exercise program now and stick with it for the rest of your life. Remember I told you earlier that if I wasn't finished with my homework by 11 p.m., I went to bed anyway? Turns out I inadvertently had stumbled upon a miracle cure. It's free. It has no harmful side effects. It makes you look better. It makes you get better grades. And it makes you happier. And it's sleep. I've always been something of a champion sleeper. I have this formula where I read 3 pages of a book every night, don't watch TV in the bedroom, and don't look at emails for 2 hours before I go to bed. But my husband and daughter are true night owls. They like to stay up late and ruminate about the day that just occurred or some imaginary day in the future that hasn't happened yet. To get them to turn off and turn in, we've employed 2 additional methods that I'll recommend. A weighted blanket, available on Amazon, and this song from YouTube called Weightless. It's 8 minutes long, and it's illegal in some countries to listen to it while you're driving. It's also guaranteed to put you to sleep. Lastly, meditation. Meditating gives you time in your day to stop and savor the moment and quiet those negative emotions like worry, envy, and irritation. It's not about eliminating those thoughts, it's about examining them, processing them, and learn to live with them better. It's also really hard. So I recommend an app called the Headspace, which has this lovely British gentleman who will quietly walk you through meditating every day. And finally, tip 5. Find an example of true bravery and resilience in this world and invite them into your life. This last one gives me a chance to tell you about our classmate Diane Hill. Right before Diane was diagnosed with the illness that would eventually take her life, she and I had been attending Weight Watchers for several months. We truly believed that our lives would be perfect if we could just lose 10 pounds. We met on Saturday mornings and sat quietly in the back of the room and listened to story after story from people who had resisted a piece of cheesecake and found a substitute for whipped cream made out of cottage cheese. First thing out of Diane's mouth when she learned that she had cancer, well, on the bright side, I'll have something to share at Weight Watchers. And that, my friends, is Diane Hill. She was relentlessly upbeat and funny, even in the face of devastating news. During her fight to live, guess what she did? She lived. She got the job of her dreams teaching at Snowden School. She shopped for a house. She bought a canoe. She had her first grandchild, and she cooked for the homeless at more than a meal. When our class asked Diane if she had any unfulfilled wishes in life, she said she'd always wanted to have a Cinco de Mayo party. Can you imagine getting to the end of your life and the only thing you haven't done is have a Cinco de Mayo party? We gave her a Cinco de Mayo party, and I suspect her entire motivation for that was to get us all to wear ridiculous mariachi hats. I could end this speech right now with a quotation from Mother Teresa that sums up the life of Diane Hill. Let no one ever come to you without leaving happier. But this is my speech, and I'm not going to do it, and I'm going to write 500 words about Diane for the newsletter next month. So I'm going to end with a quote from my favorite all-time television show, about strong women persisting in a world of evil. Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Even if you see it coming, you're not ready for the big moments. No one asks for their life to change. Not really, but it does. So what are we? Helpless? Puppets? Nah. The big moments are gonna come. It's what you do afterwards that counts. That's when you find out who you are. So from now on, we won't just face our worst fears, we're gonna seek them out. And when we find them, we're gonna slay them one by one. There is only one thing on this earth more powerful than sadness and evil, and it's us. Thank you.